Hello my friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm very excited for today's video. I was joined by my good friend Kevin Orosz, where we got into the juicy topic of polarity, that is masculine and feminine dynamics, but from a framework of natural law. It was an absolutely epic and stellar conversation, and I'm so excited to share it with you guys here today. So here is that video, and I hope you enjoy.
What's up, family? This is Kevin Orosz. In this video, we're going to be discussing polarity and natural law as it pertains to masculine and feminine dynamics and also metaphysics. And it's going to be a great one. So if you're watching this, we'd love to hear from you. What's alive for you? What is something you want to ask us or a topic you'd love for us to cover? That'd be amazing. Just going to wait for Logan to join us here. I think we did it.
Yo, what's up?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. My headset's not working, but how about now?
Oh yeah, it's way better.
Oh yeah, it like jumped to my other headset, so I guess I'm using my trucker headset.
Oh, let's truck it out, bro.
What's going on, man?
Good to see you, bro. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you.
Nice.
Happy Freedom Day.
Yeah, America.
LOL.
It's your freedom.
That's right.
Awesome, man. Well, I did a Q&A last week at AMA, and you came on, and yeah, you were sharing about having been studying polarity and diving more into it lately, and
Yeah,
I just find it to be one of the top understandings, not only to apply in relationship, but just with everything. And I would love to kind of hear your opening take on, what is polarity for you? Why is it important? And a little bit about, like what it means to you, and give your riffs, and then we can just dive in.
absolutely. Love it. I fully agree with your take on that as well. I've been interested in the idea of polarity, masculine and feminine, these cosmic forces. For like 10 years, got into David Dito way back in the day, of course, the OG. And but I mean, it was like this very kind of like detached, ethereal perspective. I had a grasp on these energies and what their qualities were, but I didn't recognize the extent that I wasn't truly embodying them fully. And long story short, I had a serious relationship kind of fall apart. Uh, Beginning of last year, roughly. I mean, it was a process, but the aftermath of that really forced me to take a look at myself, and like not play the victim game, the blame game, and just be like, what part did I play in this outcome? And about that same time, I joined a couple of polarity groups and started kind of taking in some of the teaching on that. And it just clicked, man. At a certain point, it hit me like a bag of bricks, just, that was the thing. And I could have all these flashbacks of things that were going wrong, and how polarity, or inverted polarity to be more specific, was really at the heart of most of the dysfunction in the relationship. So again, taking what's mine and not taking what's not mine, as far as the responsibility goes. I'm like, this was the missing piece. So I really dove in head first and wanted to have a really good grasp on the fundamentals of this new paradigm. And that's kind of just how I am, how I operate. I go through these paradigm shifts every so many years. I'll come across this new idea that changes a whole perspective on things. And then you have to kind of go through that period of integration, right? You have to rewire your brain with this new way of thinking and be like, well, I used to think this about it. How do I look at this from this new light? And integrate all of that knowledge. So for me, this past year, the main theme in my life and in my spiritual journey has really been, kind of reclaiming my masculinity and continuing to integrate it too, because it kind of starts as a philosophy, but the reality is just that. It's reality, it's embodiment, it's the intelligence of your body, your instincts, And so it's easy for, I could see that being a potential pitfall to get caught in kind of intellectualization of it. And so integration is so key, so important. But that's kind of like the overview of how I got where I'm at regarding the topic.
Totally.
I forget kind of the extent of your opening thing was kind of on that, but there was more to it. If you kind of
No, you nailed it. I just wanted to hear like, yeah, where you're at, where you're coming from with it. And I mean, a lot comes up as you share. Like for a lot of people, yeah, it's David Data, Way the Superior Man. And if you're a woman, you can read Dear Lover. Highly recommend his work. It's fucking great. If you go into his background, it's actually really interesting because his teacher that he got like the crazy mystic wisdom from, because his writing's like very Taoist. I had been into Qigong and Taoism when I found him. And I was like, and I had a buddy, he was also a men's coach, was like, the way of the superior man is just the Tao Te Ching translated into masculine feminine language. Like that's why it's so penetrating. And, you know, that being said, David Data, you know, I know women that have worked with him, and he low key was like hitting on facilitators and may or may not have slept with them. You know, there's a whole controversy. I don't know the truth of it. I don't want to bring that up into this, but you know, he's a human.
yeah.
He did have an amazing channel though. Like that work is channeled basically is how I look at it. It's just the truth in it shines through the words. And
Yeah.
what's really
Separate the man
fascinating
from the ideas.
what's fascinating is his teacher was Adi Da. I don't know if you're familiar with Adi Da. He's like this uber yogi kind of spiritual character who also has controversy surrounding him. Clearly, there's a pattern here, but he just had this like crazy wisdom of how men and women operate in the West is completely inverted. And not that it's like better in the East, but this has been I believe, a systematic, you know, call it indoctrination, call it conditioning, where basically your instincts tell you one thing. Like masculine instinct is protect, provide, contain, lead. Very simple. Feminine instinct is nurture, love, surrender, open. But all the like since World War II, basically, there's been a barrage through media, movies, Hollywood mythology, you name it, politics, priests, all this stuff of the opposite, where it's like, as a man, it's like, no, like you need to just suck it up and you need to go out and self-sacrifice. You need to do this, you need to do that. You need to be a yes man. Show up to your job, you know, get married, have kids, do it this way. If you're a woman, you also should do that. You need to go get a job. You need to hustle. You're a strong, independent woman. You don't need a man, although if you want a family, this is how you're going to show up. And this has created this like chain reaction where there is an inversion in polarity. And I experienced it myself where I was like, my instincts are telling me to say no and set boundaries here. My gut is telling me that this relationship is off. Like it feels codependent. It feels weird, but I'm supposed to be the good guy. I'm supposed to be the white knight. I'm supposed to do X, Y, Z. And it ended up, you know, creating dysfunctional relationships, which I obviously co-created. And when you start to really, like you said, digest the polarity information and practice it as opposed to the philosophy, which the philosophy is great. You have to start with philosophy. What you find is that when you actually practice polarity as a man today in the modern dating arena, a lot of people would say, oh, you're a toxic man, or you're, you know, this is pro men. You should be pro women. You know, there's this whole idea that masculinity itself is
Just
somehow bad,
anti-woman.
right?
Yeah.
Which is just absurd. It
Yeah.
can be further from the truth, actually.
Totally. Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points with that. I mean, I definitely agree with you that it's an agenda. And so the irony is this should be the most natural thing in the world. It's innate in us, but because we're so fucked in the head from all the mind control that you kind of have to start with the philosophy to actually kind of get everything straightened out of like how shit actually works from almost a mechanical perspective. And then as you're starting to practice, then you're feeling it. You're feeling this is right. This is aligned, you know. But let's see. I think there's a lot to do with the hypermasculinization, but a big aspect too when it comes to mind control is dialectics. So it's like polarity weaponized and pushing you to one extreme or the other. So if they want to emasculate men and masculinize women, However, if they won't be that, sometimes the pendulum swings the other direction, because this is how trauma works. It creates these pendulum swings. So if the man won't be emasculated, then they want him the toxic masculine, the domineering, heartless, careless kind of tyrant archetype, and then the feminine being the overly submissive, or basically at the sacrifice of autonomy, and the doormat archetype, the martyr, the victim, that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's where you get into kind of the nuance of it, because it's not super black and white. But yeah, I think the best way to approach this, from the understanding that these are cosmic principles, it's so much bigger than man and woman, or even humans, right? So that's one of the biggest fallacies with this whole gender theory movement, is that this is all just human constructs, and these gender roles, so to speak, are oppressive, rather than, and myself being a pagan and animist, I take all my truth directly from nature, from firsthand experience of how the universe actually operates, and seeing everything as archetypal. So when you see, these aren't human constructs, these are energetic forces that are creating literally everything. It's the creation aspect, the procreation of the universe, and this experience itself. It's so innate to everything about our experience. And then to be an intelligent being means you can observe things and say, these are the characteristics, these are the tendencies, that's how you figure out how the universe works. So you have to start with that as the foundational basis in terms of understanding what these energies actually are. But for me, like I said, to kind of go into more detail about what I meant when I said I've been studying this for a while, but I was missing some kind of key aspects of it. And what I mean is, it was this very kind of like homogenized, like, yes, masculine and feminine are things, but we need to really be balanced, and we need to really have both. And that's true, but just to a small extent. So it's not like this 50-50, you need to be half masculine, half feminine, everyone just right down the middle, partnerships 50-50 right down the middle. That was kind of the false paradigm of how I was applying these ideas. Whereas really, I think there's so much wisdom in just looking at the yin yang. It's great you're mentioning the Tao and all of that, because it's amazing how a single symbol can contain so much information. And if you look, you're not just embodying the whole circle. As a man, you're one piece of that, and then you have that other little speck, to kind of offset things, and that's the part that brings balance. It's not a 50-50, because 50-50 is neutral. If you're neutral, you're neutered. You have no power.
Yeah.
Your power comes from leaning into that power while not being completely out of balance.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're steering a bike, if you leaned all the way to one direction, you would just fall over. You're tilting into it, but you have to kind of remain a little bit offset to stay grounded. So, I mean, I think that's really, really key. And I think the heart space is kind of like that one thing that, first of all, that's the actual thing that you're connecting through, especially when you're going deeper into intimacy, you're connecting at the heart level. But the heart is the part that keeps the man, connected, right? If he was all cerebral, all leadership and dominance, he becomes the tyrant. The heart is what keeps him connected and tuned in to, her feelings and the world around, and his actual impact through his actions as well, like how he's effectively, affecting things. And that's from a positive or negative standpoint, because, masculine judgment is a gift. It's not a bad thing, but it's only a gift when it's aligned with truth, and that's the key. So I say judgment, there's a formula for it. See, the New Age community likes to kind of neuter that as well. And they're like, well, I prefer discernment, right? It's a little less icky of a word. But no, that takes the essence of it away, because judgment is discernment plus value.
Right.
And that's
Plus
why
action. There's actually action being implemented. It's not just like, oh, I've discerned this. I don't know if it's good. But I don't want to impact you. So I'm just gonna, no, like
that's true.
if someone breaks into your house right now, you're not going to use discernment. You're going to use decisive judgment and action and boom, like defense and like execution. So yeah, you're picking up, there's so much here. Like, it's funny because like, you know, I work with people on like improving their relationship and intimacy and like getting skilled at dating. Right. And there's so much there and it's so good, but a lot of it is just unlearning because on one side, polarity has been inverted and there's like propaganda about polarity. Strong, independent woman. I don't need no man, you know, Yas queen, like, and a lot of the queer tolerance agenda, like it's weird. Like I'm like, why is there so much focus on this? Like there's literally people living in boxes on the street right now. And like, that's not even touched. But suddenly the news cares deeply that trans people everywhere have rights equal, you know, really, really, really fascinating to me. I think I'm losing you there, Logan. I don't know if you can hear me. You're frozen right now. Can y'all hear me in the comments? Can you hear me now? So I think we lost Logan for a second, but thank you to whoever sent the stars. Very grateful for you. So on one side, polarity itself has been weaponized because women have been made to think they need to act like men, especially in the workplace. A lot of men are made to think that they should act like women, right? They should be, you know, soft and feminine and emasculated. And, you know, it's funny because when I work with women, most women I speak with are starving for strong masculine men to lead them, to take them on a date, to be decisive, to lead financially, emotionally, sexually, etc. Like most women I know behind closed doors will say that. And the new age community on another level is also psyoped and co-opted and has like a bunch of negative agenda stuff happening because they buy into this 50-50 thing. It's all fluid. Gender's not real. We're just souls. You know, this is duality based. This is not true. And yes, on one level of consciousness and like the all oneness of God, goddess, like creation, yeah, there is no gender in terms of like man and woman as we know them. And you could have that experience in altered states. But in terms of the day-to-day reality, 99.9% of your time on this body on earth and this beautiful experience in life, yeah, it does matter. And it's extremely important to understand it, to practice it, to live it. And it's not useful to go around downplaying it or saying that it doesn't matter and that it's not useful. Like that's where a lot of people end up in, you know, negative, tilted relationships. They wonder why they can't have a healthy relationship or they're in toxic, abusive, codependent, impotent relationships. It's because this idea that you can be 50-50 perfectly balanced all the time, it's not true. The yin yang isn't 50-50. It's not just a circle with black and white. It's that very unique balance between the yin and the yang where they have a little bit of the other inside. And that's the energy that creates balance and homeostasis. And balance does not equal perfect equality. Balance is dynamic. Balance is a little edgy. Balance has energy to it. That's exactly right what Logan said, that if you're neutral, you're neutered. You actually don't have potency of creation. You can't say no. You can't say, fuck this, I will not go along with it. And unfortunately, you know, people in power have always wanted, you know, the hoi polloi to go along. So they want to take away power, take away agency. So when you take back agency, that's when the power comes in. That's when polarity, when you're polarized, I'm gonna try to bring you back in here, Logan. Let's see. When you're polarized, you have fertile power. You're fertile. You are potent, which means you can create something. You can say no to something. When they come for your children or your family and they're like, hey, we need to perform this medical operation. We need to take this kind of money. We need to do X, Y, Z. If you're depolarized, you're like, well, you know, I'll be tolerant of this. I'm discerning. I don't know if it's good, but I'm not going to make a judgment here because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And this has hurt men the most, I would argue. this kind of like mindset.
Right. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
I
I
had
lost you there for a sec.
no idea what happened, man.
There's
The app
too much
just took a
truth
shit.
the algorithm's trying to show.
I literally thought that, man. Too real. Yeah. I mean, I missed most of what you were saying. I kind of caught the tail end, but you were talking about the judgment and everything. Um,
Well, as I was kind of saying, like there's the masculine, feminine kind of okay. Like the one thing we should talk about, and this is a rabbit hole that again, do your own research. Don't take my word for it or Logan's. Like find out for yourself. As I always like to say, go fuck around, and then you'll find out. Okay, you
yeah.
got Google, even though Google is highly censored, right? But gender theory, what is it? Was gender always the thing that all peoples talked about? No, gender theory was coming out of the Frankfurt School in the 20th century. It was a specifically designed set of principles around gender and what it means, right? And so that's why there's a difference between male and female, what's on your driver's license, and masculine and feminine, man and woman. There's a difference in terms. And this is part of the magic of language. Gender has been used to trivialize and strawman men and women into these gender, like false polarities. And so gender theory and the idea that, well, gender's not real. It's a social construct. You know, traditional gender roles are oppressive to women, are oppressive, blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, the way they've been implemented with people that didn't have any emotional maturity caused a lot of pain. No one's questioning that. But the idea that gender is just like something completely made up is true. But the reality of polarity and lived experience in a man-woman relationship is very real and is not made up or socially constructed. It's 100% natural law.
Yeah, it's like saying, because people invented umbrellas that like weather is, a human construct. It's like,
Right.
no, we created things around what is already existent to respond to that. And these ideas of kind of gender roles. My take on that is that people see them as oppressive for a couple of reasons. The first thing is, as with most things like this, it comes back to trauma, unresolved trauma. We are traumatized in so many ways. I can go ahead and just mention now, I just released an almost 4-hour presentation on my YouTube channel about mind control, and I go in depth on how trauma works, how it's used for mind control, all the dialectics, and I mean it's very, very detailed. So anyone interested in that, I highly recommend. My YouTube channel is The Wizard Factory. I can plug that more towards the end, but just mentioning that because the trauma is general, but it's also very gender specific as well. I actually plan on doing a presentation just on the weaponization of gender. And I mean, there's everything from hormonal disruption, at the food and the pharmaceuticals. So we were assaulted at the biological level and, the energetic and mental level as well. And, things like government is emasculating. There's circumcision, there's all kinds of just built-in systemic traumas that are normalized, that are constantly creating trauma around I mean, again, just taking circumcision, for example, you're being told at birth, not verbally, but through assaults, that your very manhood is such a problem that they have to go and start carving you up. That's just one example. What does that do to your mind? That you're born so imperfect that they have to do a procedure like that to fix you. I mean, that's gaslighting, built in basically. So I mean, it's so deep, it's so malicious, but just to kind of give that
the
perspective.
power of religion. That speaks to the insanity of like the most precious, innocent life form of any human being. You're going to take a knife to their most sensitive and sacred part of their body, and like that has been supported by religion for thousands and thousands of years. And like, it's unquestionable for a lot of people when I bring that up. They're like, wait, what? Like, that to me is insane. And that is a triumph of the black magic practitioner that, created that. And when you read the Bible and Jehovah, I mean, Jordan Peterson has an epic part on it when he's doing the biblical psychology Genesis lectures. how Jehovah or whatever that being is, doesn't seem a lot like a good benevolent God to me, tells I forget who it was, one of the kings, I think it was Abraham. He's basically like, look, I'll make a deal with you. I'll help you win this war. I'll help you kill all these people and conquer their land, but you got to circumcise you and all of your men in your battle camp. And he goes and tells them this, and like you can imagine, all those guys are like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he's like, look, we got to do it. God wants us to. He's going to help us win and get women in gold. It's like, when you take it out of context and say it like that, this is like some fucking demonic insanity shit. And I can't believe it's still happening.
Cult practices, yeah, lots of cults have self-mutilation to unify, it's kind of like a uniform, a biological uniform. It's so dark. Yeah. But again, that's just one thing. And so the point I was making is the reason that these roles, so to speak, are seen as or felt as oppressive is because there's so much trauma around embodying your truth, like you've been hurt in such deep ways for being who you are, that it there's that trauma response to kind of have the knee-jerk reaction, totally subconscious. It's something we're doing, knowingly, really. And then beyond that, it comes down to not understanding the true power of your respective gender energetics and embodying that as well. So you feel all this guilt and shame around masculinity because you're told it's toxic, and to be a good man is to be not a man at all, and just to be nice, the nice guy, right? The simp, and not to lead because you're afraid. And so, for one thing, I think it's interesting that I see leadership as the male version of vulnerability, because instead of like sharing from the heart, like the feminine version of vulnerability is sharing your feelings without any attached blame, judgment, or expectation, simply because you know the value of your feelings on their own. You don't have to give any directives or anything attached to that, and trusting that they're valid enough on their own to have the effect. The male version of vulnerability is leading because you are being vulnerable, because you're risking rejection and that backlash, and that, like, how dare you try to project and penetrate with your energy and try to get an outcome and things like that. So that was a pretty like mind-blowing realization for me. But then like the feminine submission aspect, and thinking that submission is automatically slavery, that's the feminine not understanding her power is not in masculine power. That's a big part of this whole agenda.
Yeah.
Is seeing power means masculine. It means being a boss babe, going and getting what you want, making all the money. Those are all masculine aspects of power, or often the toxic kind of version of it. But the feminine power is, and freedom as well, that's very counterintuitive to the wounded female, is thinking, how would surrender and submission be freedom? Because that sounds like slavery. Well, it is slavery if you're submitting to a domineering, tyrannical man that doesn't care about your feelings. Absolutely. And you should never, ever, ever do that. But to submit to a man who is leading you with devotion from the heart, and considering all of your feelings and needs and desires and anticipating those and all of that, is freedom, because it's unencumbering you with all of that intellectual noise and the need to be in your masculine, which creates anxiety, stress, and most women don't enjoy that. They do it out of what they think is necessity. The irony is, by being more feminine, they're going to attract masculine provision to keep them from having to, so to speak, be in that modality. But it requires you to believe in your feminine self-worth, that is enough. You don't have to masculinize yourself to get your needs met. And that's so scary for the feminine. And I totally understand that. But, I think the core tenet of taking your whatever respective gender back is it has to be tied into your self-worth. As a woman, You have to have enough self-worth to recognize your feelings are enough. You don't need to add anything to it as far as, like I said, leadership, assertiveness, judgment, blame, any of that. And as a man, you are enough. You're worthy of leading and being followed as well. And that's scary for us. So it's I find it really funny that we are like afraid of the opposite things because of our wounding. Men feel safer being submissive and just like, oh, whatever you want to do, babe, right? Because you're too scared to assert yourself and just say, like, let's do this, right? So that feels safer when ironically the feminine feels safer actually taking that role because she's afraid to just be vulnerable and trust that that provision will come to her.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the classic trope, right, in stories where like the main character, the protagonist, antagonist is like a godlike being, but their memory's been wiped. And so they have to like go through the story and like remember who they were. This shows up in all kinds of mythologies and films and books. And that's the only way that they could lose, quote unquote, right? Because they're like, they don't know who they are. And this is literally the story of humanity. When men and women are reclaiming the powers you're speaking to and just own them and then team up in loving union relationships and raise their children in that, and then like the whole community is built on those relationships, that type of village, they're not going to put up with tyranny or extortion or inhuman practices. They're not going to put up with destabilization of economies and all the stuff that you see. It would never happen. And that's why it's not promoted. Not only is it not promoted, I believe, there's always like the bad guys or whatever you want to call it, evil, the dark, they're stacked, and their whole thing is mentally based on this huge plan to suppress. But what they're doing is swimming upstream against natural law, which is why it takes so much planning and energy, which is why it cannot win. Now, the problem is, and I'm speaking to myself too, I'm fucking figuring my shit out. The good guys, the people that want creativity and benevolence and compassion to win, that want the human spirit to triumph and evolve, we just have to get our shit together and draw a line in the sand and be like, no, thank you, done with that. And I'm going to reclaim what you're talking about. Men reclaiming their assertiveness. We need assertive, strong men. Every single woman I've worked with in coaching, and I've worked with like CEO type women, behind the scenes, they might be the boss bitch at work where they're actually outperforming or outselling. They have higher numbers than the men, and the men have respect for them. And that's awesome. Some women truly enjoy that, and I celebrate that. If that's what you love to do, by all means. Now, the problem is you come home, you go to the bar, you go to the club, you go on a date. You can't bring that energy and expect to date a masculine man that wants to provide and protect for you. It's never going to happen because you're already wearing the pants there. And that's not your true power. Like people assume that feminine surrender and submission is a place of weakness. It's a place of power. Exactly. It's the classic saying, the king is the head of state, but the woman is the neck. She's turning the head. Who do you think is talking in the bedroom and in the back rooms, telling where to invade, what economic decisions to, like all the powerful men in history? You think they were just on their own as an island? Their woman was running the show behind the scenes in many ways. So women have always understood this in history, that the feminine position of surrender or submission is a place of power.
Yeah.
That's why the powerful queen, in her femininity, she's beloved and nurtured, and her voice, her decisions have great meaning. But she's not trying to be the king. She's the queen. And that's what I think modern women have lost, and university culture has lost, and the whole gender culture wars right now. Like I still to this day, without fail, when I post something like, the feminine values safety more than anything in a relationship, pretty fucking textbook stuff. Vast majority of people silently like and share it. There's always a comment from someone that's like, women can make themselves safe. This implies that women need to be safe from a man, and this is fucked up, and this is toxic masculinity. You're gaslight. Those people that have that belief, I look at it as an egregore, or it's a thought form that comes through them. It has nothing to do with their lived experience. If I examined their life and looked at it like slice of life, that has nothing to do with their lived experience because they deeply crave it. I know it because they're a human being.
They're living from their trauma.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, it really all comes back to that. So when it comes to, I want to talk about this idea of there being rules, right? These rules of polarity. Well, I love that you included natural law in the title, of this talk because they're inextricably linked. Polarity is an extension of natural law. You cannot separate from that. And we don't make the rules. We can break the rules. That's what's fundamental to understand about natural law is the natural law is not preventative. It's consequential.
Right.
It respects free will. You can do whatever you want, but there's going to be a produced outcome from it. So just like saying, oh, I really want to learn guitar, but oh, you mean I've got to practice and I got to learn these scales? Oh, all these rules. It's so oppressive. No, that's just going against how the universe actually works. I mean, you can think you're going to learn guitar and just mess around and not actually like learn the rules and play by the rules, but you're not, you can do that. You have that freedom, but you're not going to get the outcome that you say that you want. So that's the thing about these polarity rules. It's like you can find whatever you think works best in your relationship. It is a personal thing. It's a subjective thing to a degree. How you play is subjective. The rules themselves are objective, but it's up to you how far you want to go into it, and that's going to directly relate to the results that you get. So you can pick and choose and try to work around the rules, and maybe you can get away with that to some extent, but the more you try to play around and get too wishy-washy with it, your polarity is going to suffer the consequences. Right. And that's just how it is. But again, it's not oppressive. It's actually to learn the rules is to learn your power. That's where the empowerment comes from. It's the exact opposite of oppression.
Right.
But you have to learn what the rules are and then figure out how to make that work for you.
Yeah, it's like you're sailing and there's a super strong prevailing wind blowing, but you're trying to paddle against it and then complaining that the ocean and the sky is against you.
Right.
Meanwhile, you could just open your sail and gain the momentum and go exactly where you need to go. Now you have to navigate. You need to learn how the sails work, and you need to understand where the wind's blowing. But a lot of people in relationships, I mean, you got to wonder, like, stats don't lie. Like, there's obviously trends happening. Why is divorce rate insane? It's astronomical. Like, I'm learning this now from a new client who actually helps people mediate divorce. The divorce industry is $1 billion industry, by the way. There's a lot of money in failed polarity, it turns out.
Wow.
The divorce rate's higher than it's ever been. Now, some people will say, well, back in the day, you couldn't get divorced because you would get stoned as a woman in ancient times, or Christianity looked down on it. It's like, fair enough. Some relationships are abusive and fucked up and they should end. So let's support that in law. I'm for that. But why are so many people getting divorced? Very small fraction are actually that kind. Why is infidelity so high? Why is polyamory now this like super glamorous thing? I see so many people saying monogamy is dead. Monogamy won't exist in 10 years. Like, this is like, to me, I see a lot of people at this time in history, which I think we're approaching, the omega point. It's basically like all the graphs you can imagine are going exponential. They're all the hockey stick of exponential growth. With AI on the horizon, with people starting to augment their bodies, once the cyborg layer comes and like body augmentation, yeah, people are going to go fucking nuts. I identify as a pineapple and you need to respect me. I just make my body into a pineapple. It's like, hey, great. Free will.
Well, I identify as a pizza. So let's get together, make some love.
There you go. There you go. That stuff's going to happen. And yet most normal, I say normal as in human men and women, will return to natural law because it's the only recourse. As chaos increases, order must increase. It's just equilibrium. Nothing's going to change that. And I think the relational space, like, when I first started coaching like 8 years ago or whatever, nobody talked about polarity. If I said the word polarity, people were like, what are you talking about? Batteries? Nobody
Yeah.
now everyone's talking about it, and I think this is a great sign because people are starting to ask questions. Why is my relationship not working? Why do I keep getting ghosted on Tinder? Why did that guy just sleep with me and then never talk to me again? Why is my marriage failing and my wife doesn't respect me and I feel like I can't be in leadership? This is basic 101 human stuff that we should have learned in school. And ideally, our parents would have demonstrated for us. And now it's time to suit up, return to first principles, learn the law. You can break the law, but at your own cost.
Yeah.
You can learn the rules like a pro and then bend them like an artist. I would never
Right.
recommend trying to break natural law because it's never worth it, because reality will not increase your health, wellness, finance, love, etc. You can bend the rules. You can get really good at the natural law rules, and then you know you can change and contort how it's going to play out. You can get creative. I'm all for that. But the people that think that they're going to recreate the relationship between man and woman and the species propagation of love, the deep core love, which obviously happens to create babies as well, it's never going to happen unless you want test tube
Yeah.
babies. And I guess some people do want that.
Yeah. I mean, that's another sign of sickness for sure. But I love that you said, you know, you have to learn the rules before you can bend them. It's like in the Matrix,
Yeah.
like Neo has to master himself, understand how the Matrix works first, and then he becomes the one. But, tying that back to a previous point about the rules not being preventative but consequential. Another thing I want to add on to that is that, you know, it's not to say that women can't be masculine or even excel at masculine things and vice versa. Men can be excel at feminine things. It's not to say that can't happen. It's that I think it kind of goes against our innate nature, what our deepest desires are. And oftentimes, even a genuine, well, seemingly genuine love of like the CEO woman that you were mentioning earlier. This might be a controversial statement, and I'm not trying to make 100% blanket black and white statements, but just a thought to consider. Take it with a dash of salt. But addicts love their drugs, right? They love, and I think a lot of these behaviors, I'm kind of opening this idea of trauma bonding to not just between two people, like in like the Stockholm syndrome kind of situation, but you can trauma bond with anything, an idea, a belief, a identity construct, right? So even the very movement of LGBTQ, RMZBD, all that kind of stuff, or whether you think Ford is the best and Chevy sucks, like all these little mind games we play, that's the wounded ego trying to have some sense of like normalcy and wholeness. It's no different at the psychological level as the same things that compel addictive behaviors. You're trying to fill a hole that's inside of you. So it's to be at least raise the question. I'm not trying to, like I said, make any blanket 100% statements, but it's at least worth considering. Does that female CEO truly love that, or is it something that is like satiating that trauma response by making her feel safe because she doesn't need a man, she's got it all locked down, but there's something really deep inside her that's longing for something different, to let go of that control and that masculine power and just be, penetrated by a devoted man, that sort of thing. It's just at least worth considering. So, yeah, you can play whatever games you want and whatever roles, but I think that for the most part, there is that kind of innate desire that is like at the most deepest primordial level of our psychology. And even that gets kind of gray, to be honest, because of all of the sheer warfare being waged with the hormonal disruption. I mean, there's so much distortion in the field that like it's hard to even make those kind of, hard lines. But as a generality, I think that's worth at least considering.
Yeah,
What do
I
you think
mean,
about
I'll
that?
never forget. I was sitting in ceremony, and an indigenous person said literally, if you want to know the starting point on what to do the exact opposite of what the TV says. Like that's how they literally looked at it. And I think
Yeah.
if you really break a lot of things down, there's truth in that.
Yeah.
Because most of the things that are prescribed nowadays, think back to our good old friend 2020, are the exact opposite of sanity, health, and reason. And so the
And it
real
woke a
work
lot of
today,
people up.
yeah. And that was the beauty of it. That's the divine design of it, is that it did serve that purpose. It was a clarion call. When you want to look at healthy relationships, will you watch how a couple interacts on Netflix or in a Disney movie?
No.
There's some truth in there. Even the distorted, ridiculous, woke writing creative agencies now still have good people that are telling like true mythology, and there's codes in there for sure. Not that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but the vast majority of it is disempowered, inverted polarity, trauma bonded, codependency, etc. And if you want to know where to start, do the opposite of what they're doing. Start there and then find out what's true for you. If you want to be successful dating in this era, return to first principles. Trust your instincts, which are thousands and millions of years wise, and all your ancestors gave you them, and they worked for them, and they've been working this whole time. And now all of a sudden, because some PhD that's not even taking care of their body and is divorced is trying to tell you that gender is a construct and you should act this way, that you're gonna have a bad time if you're taking that advice and you're trying to embody it. So it's hard to teach people nowadays. And again, I'm trying to live this. Like I'm a student in the game. It's hard to teach people new polarity philosophies or practices before they have to unlearn a lot of what we've been sharing. The unlearning process is actually the big part. Just like Neo, The Matrix was a documentary. Neo had to get red pilled hard and almost popped from it to unlearn a lot of the conditioning before he could even begin to access how to reprogram the matrix. And in polarity theory, let's say, or polarity, the philosophy, your first question should be, is the way I'm showing up in my masculinity or femininity serving me, my health, wellness, sexual expression, my heart? If no, then examine the behaviors and beliefs, because they might be not yours. They might not even be in accordance with your nature. And so that's step one. The next step would be, what kind of relationship do you want to have? Because a lot of people say they want divine union. They want the man to provide and protect for them. They want to be contained and devoted to. A lot of men want that like beautiful like queen that they can worship, have children with, and just love. But their actions are hookup culture, ghosting, polarity reversal, being unfaithful, being like flaky, going with the flow. But they say they want these things. And this is rampant, unfortunately, I don't even consider myself to be part of the conscious community or new age stuff. Like I went all the way in, I did the things. And now I look at a lot of those communities as a distortion fest, because the very subtle kind of nefarious woke ideologies of like gender neutrality that we brought up earlier has infested a lot of these communities.
Oh, absolutely.
A strong, assertive masculine presence gets backbit or scapegoated often. And I've been that one. I'm a 5-1 manifester, so I get that projection field thrown at me a lot. I'm kind of used to it now. I still don't enjoy it, and it still affects me for sure. But when assertive masculine energy judgment is in a community space and it's actually aligned with truth, it is the most triggering thing in the world.
Yeah, I've experienced that as well, for sure. Yeah, I think to your point about if you want to learn truth, you got to do the opposite of what they're telling you. You might have to do that twice,
right?
Because you've got to swing from one extreme all the way to the other extreme, and then you've seen the full spectrum, and then you can actually find the path. And I think we're kind of in that process currently, collectively. We're taking the hard route, of course. It's what we do, hard-headed humans. But speaking to, we're talking about the conscious / new age community. There's a lot of this kind of anti-duality, like duality is this icky thing, and we got to evolve past that into unity consciousness and all this kind of thing. That's another false paradigm. I've coined what I call triality. So you're not negating, you're not, unity is all about homogenizing everything. It's just all the same. Everything is just one. It's all divine consciousness. What's the difference, right? It's the same kind of goes hand in hand with this anti-judgment of like, oh, well, it's all just different things having experience. There's no good, there's no evil. It's moral relativism, which is one of the worst mental states one can be in. But to find real truth, you keep the two as their own autonomous entities. You're not mixing them together and just smushing it all up and saying, "Oh, we're unified now." Triality is incorporating, and then there's the Trinity. There's the Father, the Mother, and the Son creating, and that's the manifested result. You're not just saying, oh, it's all just one thing. You recognize these are ingredients that are necessary, and you have to recognize them for what they are, keep them intact and as sacred archetypes, and then move into. So I think as a species, we're moving from kind of the patriarchal. I mean, there is some truth to this narrative of the patriarchy where like men just owned their wives and they could just do whatever and they didn't have to worry about their feelings. They just, whatever they said goes, and very tyrannical. And now it's going this complete opposite direction, which isn't so good either. And I think the truth is always, the answer is always take it back to natural law. These extremes happen because of relativism, and we're trying to say what truth is. We're trying to dictate what natural law is. It doesn't work that way. It has to. Natural law is the highest supreme authority in the universe. And even that word is very triggering. I think authority and hierarchy are good things when aligned with truth. Once again, they're only negative, and we have a trauma response associated with that because they've been oppressively used by relativists throughout history. So when you take it back to the principles themselves, the law itself, and the only way you're going to get there is direct interface with nature, with the universe. Cut out the middleman, cut out all the dogma and doctrine, and just get right to the source. That's the only way to cure the human race of all these mind viruses that is absolutely wreaking havoc on us. And the karmic, debt is quite apparent.
Yeah, and this is kind of what's happening. There's a fascinating Ray Dalio has a new book about the changing world order. And, he's super finance capital guy, so I don't believe it.
Yeah,
I don't agree with all his stuff, but it is fascinating because he's like, over the past 100 years, it's been radical centralization. So authority, tyrannical authority, and tyrannical hierarchy is just going ham. The East has become China's the industrial center of the world. Everything literally is made in China, or they have a hand in the deals. And that's by design. Their economic power is pretty fucking strong. The US has created media superiority and military superiority in many ways. And we, our movies and our values are exported worldwide. We have a big stick and we'll beat anyone who doesn't, fall in line with what we're doing. Now, the problem with all this centralization is now the cycle has to return. And there's plenty of examples of this in history. The Roman Empire is a big one. Decentralization must happen now. And so that's why we'll see things like blockchain technology, AI technology completely disrupt all these industries. And I think in the polarity space, the centralization that happened was, the 1950s housewife and domineering husband, or the Christian values. They must be decentralized. And that's why polyamory and, all these ideologies around divine union and twin flames are promulgating. It makes sense. But the real decentralization is returning to, I believe, the village and divine union. And that means natural law, polarity, masculine and feminine beings coming together in harmony. Someone was sharing a comment around, a powerful man having a powerful woman behind him. That's powerful. Like, again, back to the very real example of someone breaks into your house. You're not, as the man, you're not going to push the woman forward and be like, hey, go deal with that. You're going to step
powerful.
to the man.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. You're a strong, independent woman. Defend us. It's never going to happen. And even the most fourth wave ultra feminists in that situation would instantly become surrendered feminine if their instincts were online and they weren't completely, brain dead. So what happens when a man is in his power and leading from the heart aligned with truth? He can be high on the hierarchy, he can have status, he can be dominant, but if he's connected to his heart and
Right.
truth and he's in integrity, the women, not just his woman, his queen, his lover, but the women in the community will support that because it benefits everyone. It benefits the children, it benefits the elderly, it benefits everyone. And that's why, like, a beautiful example that I always bring up is the Iroquois. You know, they had a council of grandmothers that the chieftains had to go to get approval to go to war or to change relations with another tribe. So that's the kind of like high level polarity where masculine and feminine can be in full power, which is different, equal, but different power levels, and be in harmonic meeting instead of at opposition. And this is kind of one of the mind fucks of the modern kind of agenda that you see being played out, which is just so laughable. If you're tuned into any of this and you have an experience of real polarity in your life, anything you see on like mainstream legacy media, you know it's bullshit because you're not, you know, the actual experience. So to your point on direct experience, that's king. That's the ultimate.
Yeah.
The idea that the genders should be attacking each other, like the shadow of Me Too, like, yeah, we should call out bad behavior and hold men that have abused people to account. I'm for that.
Mhm.
But the shadow of it is that men and women are at odds now. All men
Right.
just want to abuse and harm. All women are just these social justice
Victims.
warriors. And there's like, yeah, we're victims, right? And they need to be, you know, coddled. And there's this like very damaging. If men and women are at odds, then you know it's like putting the two ants in a jar and shaking it up, and then the person that has the jar just gets paid. So this is very much a divide and conquer kind of thing. And I think as humanity wakes up, and you know, I see it every day, and I have so much hope for the future because the mind controls become so egregious and obvious that we're quickly going to see an era where the decentralization and returning to villages, getting your tight community, Dunbar's number, 150 people that you know and trust, teaming up, pooling resources, helping each other, lifting each other up, that's going to be what is powerful. And the institutions and the ideologies will be seen for what they are. It's like Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the little man behind the curtain because this is what we're projecting. And polarity is at the core of this, because men and women have to team up, because the next generation are the superheroes. We're here to pave the way, and we need healthy, healed men and women to raise those little ones that are the gurus.
Right. The very reason that it's being so weaponized and attacked and propagated, this war of the genders, is the very reason we need to be united together as men and as women, not just, oh, we're all the same, but we have our distinct powers that are perfectly complementary, and that power is the very thing that they fear the most because it will topple the matrix system of control, essentially. There's a comment, Kat Amrita here is asking, do I have more content on this of relativism versus natural law? Yes, this is what my channel is primarily focused on, so definitely check out my channel, The Wizard Factory, on YouTube mostly. And that is mostly what I talk about. I do also recommend checking out my recent presentation about mind control. I touch on this just a little bit, but to understand that from a big perspective is so vital in my opinion. But I want to make this point because I think it's so crucial when we're talking about, you're mentioning, Kevin, this shift that we're moving towards decentralization. My take on this is we as humans, we need a kind of centralization. But let me explain what I mean by that. The reason we've been so centralized throughout history is we do have this need for that centralization. The problem with that is it's not meant to be at the human level. The centralization comes from truth itself. Truth is the highest authority. It is the centralized authority, and it is the great unifier. Think about any conflict that has ever existed. It's always just two warring perspectives that don't align. Truth, it resolves all of that. And so the problem is all of this human centralized power is a product of men and women thinking they can be a proxy of that authority that only truth can ever be. And that is the inherent problem with the control system itself, being this so-called authority. Human authority over other human beings is a myth. In fact, it's the most dangerous superstition that has ever existed. That is the root of pretty much all of the problems that we have, and that must be understood. So again, we're, I think, moving now towards decentralization of human power, which is great. The thing is, that will only be successful if we move towards the centralization of truth as the great unifier. So this idea that, oh, we can all just believe different things and just be all peachy. I mean, to some degree, yes, we do have authority of our own minds. We have the right to take in knowledge, form our own beliefs about things. That is essential to freedom. However, the idea that we can all just believe whatever we want and think that things are going to work great, it's not. It's really not. It's a recipe for disaster. That's why truth has to be that centralized authority that we're all basing our behavior on, especially when it comes to objective morality, because that is the crux of what you can and cannot do as a human. Again, natural law is not preventative. That's why we've got, I mean, murder's illegal. People still do it, right? It's not about what you don't have the ability to do. It's learning what you have the right to do. Learning what your rights are by knowing what your wrongs are. And there's only 7 of them. The true 7 deadly sins: assault, murder, rape, theft, trespass, coercion, and deception. And just knowing these, that is the key to unlocking freedom and prosperity for humankind. But the problem is we're moving in this direction of decentralization, but most people are unfortunately in a state of moral relativism mentally. They don't yet understand that. So that has to come first, and that's why my channel is all about teaching this, because it's absolutely the most essential thing.
Yeah, I love that, brother. We'll end on that note. We could go on forever here.
Yeah.
Definitely drop your channel in the comments here. I know you have a Facebook page too for Wizard Factory where they can check out, because I know Facebook does not like Google links because they own YouTube, but we'll put it in the comments anyway.
I'll put my my link tree down there, so it'll have everything connected. But yeah, I appreciate the time, this great conversation with you, man. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope it was useful to the viewers, and hopefully y'all will come and check out more of my work. I've got quite a bit.
Yeah, make sure you're following Logan here and check out his channel, The Wizard Factory. If you're watching this later, type in replay and share in the comments, you know, something that popped off for you. There's a lot of truth bombs in here. I know it's a lot to take in, and I kind of unfiltered myself, which I don't usually do. But it was fun, and it seems like people enjoyed it. Make sure you share this if you're watching live and you loved it, or tag somebody that would really resonate with this material. And if you're not already in my group, the Polarity Dojo, and you want to do more learning and share stories and get some of the exclusive content in there, make sure you join now. I'll drop that in the comments as well. And Logan, my brother, big love for you, man.
Same to you, man. Big respect to everything you're doing.
Sure.
Thanks for having me.
Thank y'all.
Bye, everyone.